leadership that seemed to care more about ensuring the party's self-preservation rather than its relevance to common working-class people in the 21st century. The Forest City Club of the Communist Party of Canada, of which I was a member, submitted an amendment to the Communist Party's program to be discussed and voted on at the Central Convention. The amendment which our club submitted seemed mundane enough. After all, it was a position taken by the vast majority of those on the left side of the political spectrum. The amendment we submitted called for the Communist Party of Canada to recognize settler colonialism in their party program. Little did I know, this would erupt into a 2-day debate on the convention floor, the most heated topic during the entire convention. This debate on the convention floor, among many other disagreements which I have yet to bring up, is the reason why I am resigning from the Communist Party of Canada. Yes, you heard me. I'm resigning from the CPC. But before you decide to turn off the podcast in anger, please hear me out. To me and to many other people who are showing their solidarity with Indigenous people fighting for their sovereignty and their right to self-determination over their own lands, settler colonialism is not even up for debate, but is the theoretical framework that grounds people in the understanding of the socio-economic dynamics between settlers living on this land and the Indigenous people their ancestors colonized. One former Communist Party leader, who was famous for his appearance on a Rick Mercer skit that appeared on television in 2006, approached the convention and stated his belief that settler colonialism is not a Marxist concept, and that Canada could not be both an imperialist country and a settler colonial country. The current leader, Elizabeth Rowley, approached the convention following Miguel and expressed her displeasure at the concept of being a settler, stating, "Canada is my homeland too, comrades." Several others in the leadership also opposed it, as well as much of the general membership, including one delegate who was a former member of the Communist Party of Pakistan and stated that most communist parties across the world do not have settler colonialism in their programs, nor do they recognize it. This all came as a huge shock to me, as I thought this was the general consensus among all those who identify as being on the left. The proposal for my club failed to pass by a margin of at least 2-1. Mostly, it was the people under the age of 35 who fought hard for its inclusion and tried, desperately, to make the old guard who had been in the party since the Vietnam War understand. It was all a futile effort, though. With that motion failing, the Communist Party of Canada went through another convention without recognizing settler colonialism. And because of the way democratic centralism functions, when I ran in the 2019 federal elections, I had to pretend that I didn't believe in settler colonialism, too. During the federal elections of September 2019, my beliefs were really put to the test. Just like during the last election I had ran in, I took the role of candidate as seriously as possible and attended several debates on top of door-to-door canvassing and studying party literature. Hot topics during the election included the riots in Hong Kong, Canada's relationship with China, and Indigenous sovereignty. These weren't topics that I wasn't comfortable discussing, but not because I didn't have my own opinions, but because I was bound by democratic centralism and represented the opinions of the Communist Party of Canada the entire duration of the time I ran in the elections as a candidate. These weren't topics that I wasn't that comfortable discussing, but not because I didn't have my own opinions, but because I was bound by democratic centralism and represented the opinions of the Communist Party of Canada the entire duration of the time I ran in the elections as a candidate. I had to toe the party line, so to speak. When the topic of Indigenous sovereignty came up, as it frequently did, it dawned on me that the Communist Party of Canada does not have adequate stances on these issues, and from what I experienced at the convention earlier that year, didn't seem to care either. When I saw that even the Social Democrats within the ranks of the NDP had a better line than the Communist Party of Canada on Indigenous sovereignty, I felt extremely demoralized. And following that election, I took a 4-month-long break from political organizing on behalf of the party. Before the federal election, I received a phone call from the Communist Party's central organizer asking me to put my podcast on hiatus for the election, citing that I had not obtained permission from the Central Committee to interview the Deputy Secretary of the Communist Party of Kenya, and thus went against democratic centralism. I've since uploaded that episode because I am no longer bound by democratic centralism, and that episode taught me a lot about the perspective of radical leftists and workers living in Kenya, and their turbulent relationship to Chinese capital. As of releasing this podcast, I am no longer a member of the Communist Party of Canada. While I am still ideologically aligned with them on many issues, I find our disagreements too sharp to manage and feel it is best to forge my own path forward instead. Looking back in hindsight, I've said and done many things that I've since come to regret, and also see some of the texts I've read in a different light. For instance, in the quote from Norman Bethune that I had quoted earlier in this segment, he refers to the rich synonymously with the ruling class. Would Norman Bethune, who gave his life for the Chinese Revolution, who Mao Zedong, in the essay In Memory of Norman Bethune, wrote that every Chinese communist must learn from the true internationalist spirit of Dr. Norman Bethune, would Norman Bethune, if he were alive today, be okay with what China looks like given its massive wealth disparity? Norman Bethune considered the rich to be synonymous with the ruling class, and by the time of his death, the first billionaire on earth, which is thought to be John D. Rockefeller, had accumulated that fortune only 23 years earlier. Today, the income inequality in China parallels countries with capitalist economies and makes even the staunchest communists question whether China is legitimately on a path of socialist development. This was one of the first few factors that made me question the Chinese Communist Party, which the Communist Party of Canada consistently defends. When I found out about China's foreign policy, however, I could not deny that they had lost all aspirations towards internationalism. And without internationalism, how can there be socialism? When I had found out that China had invested more than $20 billion in Canadian tar sands back in 2012, the same tar sands that I had spent years protesting with other members of the Communist Party of Canada to have shut down, I felt betrayed. Then I also found out that China had invested tens of billions of dollars into Israel over the last decade, despite the Communist Party of Canada staunchly supporting boycott, divest, and sanction campaigns against the apartheid state of Israel. Do you see a pattern here? When I saw that our once fraternal party, one that our leaders seemed unwilling to criticize, were doing business deals that go directly against the political lines that we were trying to uphold, then you can understand how I could feel they may not actually be our allies. Rather, they are actively working against the goals that we are trying to achieve. To hold these questions to heart and speak truth to power is not to lose your credentials as a communist. If Catholicism doesn't represent all Christians, then it equally doesn't make sense that all those who support socialism with Chinese characteristics are representative of all communists. I am a communist, and that is something that hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is what my future directions and goals will be. And so you might be wondering, Clara, what are you going to do now? That's an excellent question, but that will have to wait for another episode down the road. I will continue my podcast and YouTube channel independently from here on out. Now that I have no party lines to toe, what you'll hear from this podcast will be from yours truly, plus maybe some like-minded comrades here and there. And so, in conclusion, if you've made it this far, let me take a moment to thank you for listening. If you found this helpful in any way, please share this episode with a friend or comrade. Until next time, take care and carry on, for the struggle still remains. We have nothing less but a world to gain, and nothing left to lose but our chains. I hope to continue on with that struggle in my own way. And I hope that you, wherever you find yourself in this world, take solace in the fact that you are not alone, and that I am with you in spirit. I hope that you can follow me on my own journey, if not as a friend, then as a comrade. Revolution always, and solidarity forever.